A little bit left to do on here. I want to take the drawbar and swing plate off, then pivot shaft, and then final drives and see how they separate away from the case. And that'll be as far as I need to take 1113s back in down for sub-assemblies for winter projects. So yeah, getting dark out here, dang it. Everything was going pretty well. I want to keep going, but we'll cover things here, put tools away, and probably hit it hard again tomorrow. Okay, so it's the next day and we're still working on 1113 as promised. We've been dodging sporadic rain showers out here. Just about the time I get ready to do something, the darn rain starts coming out of the sky. So anyway, what I had done was, after getting both the track frames parked over here next to the chains, I started assessing the pivot shaft, cleaned it up, and I'll tell you what, we got some witness marks from where the bushings rode, but I mean, you can just catch some wear with your fingernail, and it's not worn too bad on the bottom. It's mostly worn on the front here. Back here, there's really nothing at all, but that makes sense because that's where all the thrust forces would be anyway. So I'll tell you what, for the way I usually take old Caterpillars apart, that thing's about as close to new old stock as you can get. I've had much worse ones. I can show you guys some worst case scenario examples when I start refurbing this thing. We're not going to get into that right now. We're just taking stuff apart today. But I also noticed, after I started cleaning the grease off, both of the inner track frame oil seals stayed on the pivot shaft, and I think that was from shooting possibly too much grease into here, which I guess I'm not really against, because you can see it kept the wear off of there. Hammered that outer face of the seal housing into a cone shape. The old rubber seal, lots of old dried grease in there. Same scenario over here. See if I can get that off without a prying tool. Come on. There we go. Same thing here, quite deformed. Leather lip is pushed out quite a bit right there. Anyway, I guess too much grease is better than none, right? So long as they just keep greasing it after they pop those seals out of there and keep purging any grit out that might have infiltrated through here. Sealing surface does not look bad, so all in all, I'm pretty happy with it. So before I start pulling either of these finals off, I need to take a couple pieces off of here first. We'll be starting with the pivot shaft here. Structurally speaking, this is the strongest part of a Caterpillar D2. That's why they anchor that pivot shaft under here, and it's also why they put the front, let's get that out of the way. There we go. They put that front drawbar pivot bracket on here too. That bolts to the bottom of each final drive, so that has to come off before either one can come off of the back end. And you consider the fronts of these final drive housings here are pretty much solid cast. Great big retaining caps on them. There's usually an alignment dowel beneath one or both of these caps that also keeps that shaft from sliding side to side. But yes, this is what I call the can't bust it zone of a D2, because, well, you can't bust it. They didn't even break any of this stuff on poor old 2115, which is saying something considering they still managed to bend the pivot shaft on one of the track frames. How they managed to do that with a raging, what, 38 horsepower machine, I don't know, but they managed. Back of the machine once again, you see the drawbar comes out, and this swing plate actually goes through and is captured through the center of that drawbar. So basically, to get the drawbar out, you have to unbolt the plate from these brackets. You can see I've got these pretty much threaded out. As I'm sure you noticed, most of that stuff underneath is already threaded out too. Got that done off camera. I don't know about these stop pins. I don't know if they're authentic cat or not. I've never seen any like this. It's got a pair of them. This one kind of took it a little bit, but it's still there. So anyway, that's why I've talked about this before. That's why you always want to do your pulling on a Caterpillar, especially a D2, from the drawbar and not from the swing brace, because this drawbar is hooked to the can't bust it. Okay, the swing brace through these brackets is basically just attached to the back of the case, and that is a will bust it. So yeah, if you hook to this, you're probably going to take what is hooked to it with you. But if you hook to this, you're likely to leave all these pieces behind. You will rip these brackets right off this back end housing. That is not a structural component. Alright, so after all that, I got both of the caps off for the pivot shaft, but as you can see, this one is still a nice tight fit. It's holding itself in there, and that's a good thing. When these start wallowing loose, that means you have a rather high hour machine that has probably been abused. So let me see if I can tap this out and actually catch it with these jack stands. Let's move it. There's that side. I like how tight that is in those housings yet. There we go, it's free. Here's their wear piece, an old piece of wood that goes between the drawbar and the swing brace. Oh man, look at the gumbo built up on that thing. Wow. Alright, so I've changed my blocking around somewhat now. I've got the sprockets clear. That will facilitate removing both final drives. I'm going to leave those sprockets on those for now. And these swing plate brackets serve as an excellent place to put blocking back here, and it keeps the whole final drive in the clear. So it's time to drain each final, because the fluid level should be up to this plug opening right here, and these appear to be full. And if you don't drain them, when you split them from the case right here, you're going to have a lot of fluid running and making a heck of a mess. So these are the earlier style with the, it's basically a pipe plug down here. Later ones had a flat shouldered plug. Anyway, this is where you really hope you don't hear anything go clink and land in the bottom of the pan. And that is some thick stuff. Wow. Not much for sludge on that though. About the same over here. Uh-oh. That is a piece of metal. Honestly, looks like part of a fold over lock. We'll get it cleaned off and have a better look. Yeah, that stuff's so thick. This is where you go to lunch. Wait for that to drain. Okay, got lunch out of the way. By that time, I was ready to put the drain plugs back in under those final drives, so they are empty. Couple of interesting developments here though. This was the piece of metal that I found on the drain plug, and I found another one after it had drained for a bit right here. And if you look at it closely, you can tell, I think that one's been between a couple gear teeth. So I'm not really sure what they are, whether they're fold over lock pieces, but I'm starting to think it may be off of one of these. Now this is a oil drain, kind of a return tube that goes inside the final drives on these wide gauge D2s. It will mount in there about like this, and what it does, it picks up oil from the large bowl gear that's right behind this final drive cover. The oil will fall into that trough and it goes down this tube and it puts it out to that inner bearing that's on the sprocket shaft in there, just to kind of keep oil returning back into the central part of the housing. Now, I've never taken a D2 apart yet where this was not rubbing on the backside of the bowl gear. I don't know why it's like that, but they just were. So I am betting, well, I'm hoping that's what these pieces are right here, is from a piece like that. Yeah, you can see that fine line right on there. I'm pretty sure that was between a couple bull gear teeth. So hopefully we don't have any other underlying damage in there. We will find out what's going on when we take that apart eventually. Now I've also removed all the bolts for the final drive on this side. So we'll start down here. We have 1, 2, 3 on the bottom. And on the top side now, behind this brake pivot housing, there is number 4. We'll go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now, since this is an early first gen Caterpillar D2, like so many other things, there is a minor difference. On all of the later version tractors, you will have a 13th final drive bolt down in this area down here below that inner bearing bar. Looking at the parts manual, you can see right there, up to tractor 5J1602 only had the 12 bolts holding the final drive to the rear end housing. At 5J1603 they added that extra one right down there at the bottom. I think they figured out that they needed a little bit more integrity in that area when you consider what an average human can do with a whopping 38 horsepower, right? And as long as I had this housing loosened up to access that final drive bolt, I also took the brake pedal off because I don't need that thing sticking up trying to get snagged on something and possibly broken after I pull this off the rear diff or the rear end. And I tell you what, that is a hallmark of a low hour machine. That thing looks like a cheese grater yet. I want to show you guys something. So my buddy John sent up a couple brake pedals, donated them to the channel, that are just astounding. Look at how slick that thing is. You can barely see any of the texturing left over on that side. You know, I talk about assessing condition of machines quite a bit. That is a contrast right there from what they started out like to what they can finally get worn down to. And if anything, it's a testament to how many operating hours these little tractors could have put on them back in the day. I mean, how many times does a person have to put their foot on that pedal and release it again to wear it down that much? Because look at the difference in the thickness here. How much material has just been worn away. That's almost sharp right there. That's just astounding that they could ever get that slick. And those are the worst D2 brake pedals I've ever seen for wear. Alright, so now we're ready to pull the final. Now in a perfect world, this would just slide right off and the steering clutch drum comes off the steering clutch, clutch stays on the cross shaft that's in the rear end. On D2s that have sat for a long time, a lot of condensation builds inside that steering clutch compartment and those clutches can rust and stick. I don't anticipate a lot of problems with this side. I think the other side is more apt to give us problems, being that we had a stuck clutch over there when we first hauled it home. I've got this one moving a little bit already. Let's just see how it goes. Just having a closer look here. Boy, those springs look excellent. That clutch stack is nice and fat. A lot of rust in there. It's quite dry. Honestly, I've seen them a lot worse. Looking in here at the inside of the clutch drum, you want to look for little grooves being cut in these splines where those steering clutch fingers basically release and engage in the same travel area. And it's looking very good in there. Very little wear on this. I'm sure 1113 was not a high hour machine to begin with. All right, now round number 2. Let's see if this side gives us any problems. This far, it shouldn't give us any problems. You know, if anything, it's a little bit oilier on this side. And I can't see where the frictions have been swelling at all. Sometimes they'll get so rusty that that clutch pack swells up and it actually coil binds these springs. You know, this side's getting close though when you look at it, so I'll have to do some measuring on these and see exactly against spec where they are. But honestly, man, the inside of that drum, that's looking pretty darn good too. Even these bearings look good in here. Man, it's just, I don't know. This thing, yeah, inside it's a lot better condition than what I expected it to be. So we're just about done here today, boys. Okay, that's as far down as I'm going to take this thing. I also pulled both of the steering clutch levers off as well as the shifter. It's going to make this thing cover a lot easier. So this is going to sit right where it's at. We've got all kinds of work lined up for this winter. We have the transmission / back end sub-assembly. We have 2 final drive sub-assemblies, and we have 2 track roller frame sub-assemblies. That should be a few months worth of work right there. Now, yeah, man, I was really expecting to find a disaster in these steering clutches back here, especially considering we had one of them that was mildly stuck when we hauled this home, and this thing had spent we don't know how many years sitting, but it's looking a lot better than I was expecting. Anyway, earlier this summer, when I was getting parts lined up left and right, I ordered in to get a complete set. Let's see if we can get out of this glare. Complete set of the replacement bimetallic steering clutch frictions, and the new steel separators. Between these two boxes right here and right here, we have a complete set of those. Got those from General Gear and Machine, Boise, Idaho. I'll pop a link in the description down below. If you need steering clutch parts for old cats, they are the go-to source. Also got a couple of new old stock steering clutch release bearings that ride in here in these housings just inside these wishbone forks in here, but we may end up using that stuff anyway. Those bimetallics pretty much cure the rusting and sticking problems in these, but we will just have to see if we end up needing them. Oh, and this clutch, main clutch in here, is going to require all kinds of work. This thing is seized up any which way you look at it. The vertical shaft here that goes down through, the fork is attached to it. It is stuck in its pivot way down there in the bottom. And of course we have the main clutch disc has swelled. We have all those over center fingers and links that are all stuck. The pressure plates are stuck to the input shaft. None of this stuff moves at all in here, so we definitely have our work cut out for us. It even took some heat to loosen the nut that should have just spun right off without any trouble, that retains all this. I was hoping I could maybe get some of that stuff to move, but no such luck. So yeah, it's gonna be quite the task to get all that stuff freed up. And add to that, we found those mystery metal chunks in that one final drive. I have no doubt we're going to be able to occupy the shop for probably the entire winter with just those pieces right there. So, oh God, the sun. So, we got another project ticked off the fall to-do list. We got 11/13s back in, broken down. And I'm just going to cover all those pieces right where they sit, and we're going to pluck them out of the snowbank one by one as we make progress on that this winter. So, thanks for watching, everybody. On to the next.